Shining your shoes has many advantages. Aside from good hygiene, that cleaning and shining shoes help combat odors, dirt, and bacteria that accumulate from routine wear. Aside from increasing the lifespan of your shoes and maintaining your shoes' color, shined shoes help make a good impression. Beautifully shined shoes will elegantly finish any outfit. On the contrary, a sharp suit worn with dull and dusty shoes will make the wearer lose all credibility. The same goes for your car. Polishing your car can help prevent the paint from fading and oxidizing due to UV rays from the sun. A shiny, clean car will be more attractive to potential buyers and can help you sell it for a better price. You know, it's important to periodically polish your silver so it doesn't develop a thick coat of tarnish that is hard to remove. Polishing silver helps it shine and gleam. It's even more important to have your teeth polished. Polishing removes plaque and tartar buildup, which could lead to gum disease. Polishing removes bacteria that cause bad breath. And when combined with regular brushing and flossing, polishing can help prevent cavities. Polishing can remove surface stains from coffee, tea, tobacco, make your teeth look brighter and younger looking. The more important something is, the more important it is to care for it, to upgrade it, to polish it, and make sure you present it in its best possible light. And as important as your shoes are, or your car, or your silver is, or even your teeth, there are things in this world that are even more important than any of the above. Say Chazal in Vayikra Rabbah, Tiku b'chodesh shofar, b'chodesh hazeh shapru ma'aseichem. In this month, beautify your mitzvahs. What does the shofar say? What's the message of the shofar? The shofar tells us to beautify, to shine, to polish our mitzvahs. At first glance, one may think, maybe we're barking up the wrong tree. Look, most observant Jews are keeping the positive commandments. They're keeping Shabbos, they're wearing tzitzis, they're wearing tefillin, they're putting up a mezuzah, they're hearing the shofar, they're taking the lulav, they're sitting in the sukkah. We keep all the positive commandments. We say Kriya Shema. It's the negative commandments that perhaps we have a issue with. Lashon Hara, Betul Torah. But as we may discover, it may be time for our mitzvahs to receive a much needed upgrade. Reb Schwab was once staying in the home of the Chafetz Chaim on a Shabbos. And on Friday night, the Chafetz Chaim spoke about the Gemara in Yuma and Daf Ayin Hey, that the Gemara says the man miraculously tasted like anything a person desired. So the Chafetz Chaim asked, what flavor would someone taste if he ate the man without thinking? And the Chafetz Chaim answered, the man was spiritual, and without thinking, there's no taste. Anything that is spiritual is meaningless without putting your mind to it. So this year, for the Shabbos Shuva Drasha, Tafshin Pei, we're going to do something a little different. People are tired now. It's a 3-day Yom Tif. So, enough inspiration. We had enough inspiration. We're going to have a little education. And we're going to speak this year about the subject of Kavana. Having a formal Kavana before you do a mitzvah, that you're doing the mitzvah of Hashem. Meaning, is it enough just to do the mitzvah? You bought the most beautiful esrog, or a pair of tefillin, or sukkah, or you may have learned for 5 hours, but you didn't have the formal Kavana that you're doing a mitzvah. Do you get credit for the mitzvah? This is the famous sugya, mitzvahs tzrichos kavana, or mitzvahs ein tzrichos kavana. Do mitzvahs need kavana or not? And I think many are under the mistaken impression that the halacha is mitzvahs ein tzrichos kavana, but this is simply not correct. Shulchan Aruch and Siman Samach Sif Daled brings yesh omrim ein mitzvahs tzrichos kavana. Some say mitzvahs do not need kavana. This is the opinion of Tosfos and Rabbeinu Yoina. V'yeshoimim shetzrichos kavana. Some say mitzvahs do need kavana. This is the opinion of the Bahag, that you do need kavana. And the Shulchan Aruch's conclusion is mitzvahs tzrichos kavana v'chein halacha. The halacha is mitzvahs tzrichos kavana, which means if someone did a mitzvah without having a formal kavana, they do not get credit for the mitzvah and they have to do the mitzvah again. It's a shame, says the Chafetz Chaim, that one who spent their whole life devoted and dedicated to doing the will of Hashem and doing what the Torah requires will not reap and receive the reward simply because they did not have Kavana. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach in Halicha Shlema on the Moed Mashon Yom Kippur Parak Beis Ois Chaf Beis, well then how would it help to have Kavana? How would it help to do the mitzvah again with Kavana? What would the halacha be if somebody took a lulav and esrog and they were mekayim the mitzvah, and then later they found a nicer lulav and esrog, a more muhuder lulav and esrog, and they wanted to shake it and they shook the more muhuder lulav and esrog? They accomplished absolutely nothing. They were already yotze the mitzvah the first time. So just because it's nicer, they're not accomplishing anything more. The mitzvah is already performed. So ask Rav Shlomo Zalman, how is it going to help to do the mitzvah again? He already did the mitzvah, albeit without kavana. How will it help to do it again? Must be, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, kavana is not an ingredient that is needed to fulfill the mitzvah. Kavana is an essential component of the mitzvah. If you did the mitzvah without kavana, chashuv legamri ki'ilu loy asa klal mitzvah. It's considered completely as if you did not do the mitzvah at all. It's like you did nothing. Kavana is not an ingredient, it's a fundamental component in the mitzvah. In fact, in the Avas Sion, Drashud, page Tezayin, he writes that the Rabbi Yehuda explained that the reason why Kavana is so essential is because inherently wearing tefillin, taking a lulav and esrog, sitting in a sukkah have no value other than the fact that Hashem commanded them. Therefore, they must be performed for that reason. And if you don't have that Kavana, then what you did has no value. Rabbeinu Bechaye in Bamidbar, Parak Lamed Hey Pasuk Yud Aleph, he illustrates as follows. You have a roitzeach. If he kills intentionally, he is liable to the death penalty, to capital punishment. But somebody who murders unintentionally only gets galus. And the reason is because the leiv, the mind, is ikar ha'adam, is the primary aspect of man. Therefore, since his principal part did not participate, einoi nerag, he is not killed. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, the same goes with the performance of mitzvahs. Hakoil taloi belev. Everything depends on the mind. You know, Rabbi Tzion Abba Shul has an incredible diuk in Chovos HaBavos. The Or L'Tzion writes, page Kuf Tzadi Gimel. He says, the Chovos HaBavos says in Shar Avodas Elikim, in the beginning of the fourth parak, there are two general categories of mitzvahs. You have mitzvahs halavavos, mitzvahs that are duties of the mind, emunah, bitachon, and then the Chovos HaBavos has a category, mitzvahs halavavos v'ha'evarim yachtav, mitzvahs that combined the mind and the limbs, learning Torah, davening, sukkah, lulav, tzitzis. Asked Rav Ben Sion Abba Shaul, why didn't the Chovos HaBavos create a third category? You have mitzvahs halavavos, mitzvahs of the mind, mitzvahs halavavos v'ha'evarim yachtav, of the mind and the heart, and then just mitzvahs hoivarim, mitzvahs of just the body, meaning there should be a third category. Mitzvahs of the mind, mitzvahs of the body and the mind, and mitzvahs just of the body, mitzvahs hoivarim. The answer is, says Rabbi Tzion Abba Shul, we see from here, there is no such category of mitzvah, of just a mitzvah that is done with action. Masa levad loy hichshiv klal, mikivan shebemasa levad loy asa avodas Hashem. But the Mishnah Berurah takes us even further. The Mishnah Berurah writes, not only if you're not mechavin for a mitzvah, is it not considered like you performed a mitzvah. So if one put on tzitzis and they were not mechavin for the mitzvah, not only does one not get credit for the mitzvah, but now it becomes like wearing a four-cornered garment without putting on tzitzis. And that is a violation of wearing dalet kanvas without tzitzis. So this, the Mishnah Berurah says, could easily occur if you run up to the bima and you throw a talis on yourself without kavana. Or let's say somebody sits in the sukkah, but does not have kavana to mekayim the mitzvah of sukkah. Not only does one not get credit for the mitzvah, now it's considered as if you ate outside of the sukkah. Well, says Rav Shlomo Zalman, according to this logic of the Mishnah Berurah, something rather unusual would come out. Says Rav Shlomo Zalman, it would come out that an oinen, he writes this in Minchas Shloimeh Aleph Aleph, an oinen who's not making a bracha on the talis or tzitzis, and is not having kavanah to mekayim the mitzvah, should not be allowed to put on his dalet kanfos, because he's not being mechavin for the mitzvah, and in that case, shouldn't he be violating the mitzvah of tzitzis? So says Rav Shlomo Zalman, he disagrees with the basic premise of the Mishnah Berurah that if you're not mechavin, now it's considered like you wore a beged of dalet kanfos without tzitzis, or you sat in the sukkah, or you ate outside of the sukkah. However, in the Minchas Shloimeh, Chelek Beis, Siman Tzadi Aleph, Rav Shlomo Zalman is concerned for the view of the Mishnah Berurah, and in the Sefer Mitzvah V'Oisa, page Tuf Kuf Pei Beis, he says that even though the Mishnah Berurah's view is novel, but he heard from Mordechai Karp, the author of Mishmeres Moed, that the Chazon Ish greatly valued this view of the Mishnah Berurah. Further comes the Chayei Adam, and the Chayei Adam says that even the opinion, mitzvos, ein srichos kavana, that it's only b'di'evad you don't need kavana, and you're yotzei. But if you don't have kavana, you'd still be violating the mitzvah saseh of ula avdoi b'chol avavchem, serving God with all one's heart. And without kavana lotzeis, if you're not being mechavein to be yotzei the mitzvah, or even according to the opinion, mitzvos, ein srichos kavana, you'd be violating the principle of ula avdoi b'chol avavchem. You know, amazingly we know there's a concept of aseh doicha lois aseh. And aseh is doicha lav. So for example, Big Day Kahuna were made out of klayim. So the mitzvah of Big Day Kahuna is doicha the lav of klayim. But says Rav Nosson Adler, you know, why does it say by the Big Day Kahuna V'asu bigdei kodesh la'aharoi nachicha u'levanav lechahanoi li, to serve me? Why the emphasis on me that it should be lishma? Says Rav Nosson Adler, normally we say that a person should be mekayim a mitzvah even shaloi lishma. Shemitoich shaloi lishma ba lishma. That from being mekayim a mitzvah shaloi lishma, you'll eventually come to do it lishma. But, says Rav Nosson Adler, it's quoted in the Sefer Torah Ladas, Pashas Tetzaveh. That's by regular mitzvahs. We say, Mitoich shaloi lishma, ba lishma. But when a mitzvah comes along with pushing off a lav, it will only be able to push off the lav if you do it lishma. Therefore the Torah reminds us that when it comes to the Big Day Kahuna, lechahanoi li, you better do it lishma. So it comes of Tzvi Pesach Frank in Mikroi Kodesh, Chelek Beis on Pesach, page Kuf Chav Ches. He says in the name of the Aderas that if only a mitzvah lishma can push off a lav, then it would come out even the opinion mitzvahs ein srichas kavana. He would hold that a mitzvah that has an aveira involved in its performance, for example, the regular blowing of the shofar. You can't blow shofar on a Shabbos or a Yom Tif regularly. It's a shvus to blow an instrument. We do it because it's a mitzvah d'oraisa. But that is only if the mitzvah is performed b'kavana. But if you blow the shofar without kavana, even the opinion that mitzvah is ein srichos kavana would hold you're not allowed to blow the shofar because of the lav and the shvus that is involved in blowing the shofar. So mitzvahs need kavana. And without kavana, one would not be yotzei. Is this a din d'oraisa, or is this a din d'rabanan? The Bir Halacha writes in Siman Samach Siv Daled, that the requirement to have Kavana is a requirement d'oraisa. The Rashbam writes this explicitly in Psachim. Now, I just want to give credit to a beautiful sefer. Many of the Marmakomis of this year come from a beautiful sefer on the topic of Mitzvos Tzrichas Kavana. It's called Kasher Tziva Hashem, written by Rav Daniel Garfinkel. And when we talk about what Kavana a person should have when they do the mitzvah, the Mishnah Berurah in Siman Samach Sivkat and Zayin says that Kavana means Kavana Lotzeis Ba Bezeh Kasher Tziva Hashem. It's an intention to fulfill your obligation as God commanded. Our Chashulchan has a bit of a different formula. He says, Miskavein l'shem mitzvah. Now, does one have to be mechavein to the specific mitzvah they're doing, or is it sufficient just to be mechavein that they're doing a mitzvah? The Aruch HaShulchan is of the opinion that one does not have to have in mind that specific mitzvah. Rashi in Bracha says, Sheyehei miskavein l'shem mitzvos. However, the Derech Pikudecha, he disagrees, and he says, Tzorech lechavein hineni mechavein ba'asiyasi zois Lotzeis Yedei Choivas Mitzvah Ploinus. So the Derech Pikudecha says, one should have in mind that particular mitzvah. But La'aniyas Dati, the Lashon on the Shulchan Aruch is mashma, like the Bnei Yissaschar and the Derech Pikudecha, because Shulchan Aruch says, Lotzeis Be'asiyas Oisa Mitzvah, that particular mitzvah. Furthermore, look in the Mishnah Berurah Siman Taf Ayin Gimel Sivkat and Aleph, where he says, Koidem sheyikadesh, before you make kiddush the night of the seder, yechavein, you should have in mind, sharoitza lekayim mitzvahs kiddush, v'gam mitzvahs dalad koises. So the Mishnah Berurah delineates precisely which mitzvah you're going to be fulfilling when he talks about kavana. Furthermore, he says, for example, some have a custom to say, harini muchan lekadesh ulekayim mitzvahs arba koises. So that seems to indicate that you do need to specifically be mechavein for a particular mitzvah. And this idea that one has to be mechavein, to be mekayim the mitzvah before they fulfill the mitzvah, the Ksav Sofer says is articulated in the pasuk of Kriya Shema. Writes Ksav Sofer Shal Sechuvas Archaim, the end of Siman Kov Zayin. It says, Uzachartem es kol mitzvahs Hashem. First remember the mitzvahs, first have kavana, and only after that, va'asisem oisam, then you should perform them. Sfasemes writes that the simple kavana, that you're doing a mitzvah because that's what Hashem commanded, is the most important kavana that you could have. There are many very elevated, lofty kavanas you could have, but the most important, the one that encompasses all of them, is the kavana that you're doing the ratzon and the commandment of Hashem. Like we find, Nadav Avihu were very great men, and they were indicted for bringing a strange fire. Asher lo yitziva Hashem. The Sfasemis writes in the name of the Chidush Arim. We learn from here, the main aspect of a mitzvah is the intention to do the mitzvah because that is what Hashem commanded. That's much more important than any other kavana. Because Nadav Avihu, being great people, they had many lofty and elevated kavanos, but they're punished because they did not think that this is something Hashem commanded. So conversely, if one were to think they're doing a mitzvah because that is what Hashem commanded, that kavana encompasses all possible kavanos. So although this is not easy to hear, it's a difficult pill to swallow, that perhaps one has not been doing mitzvahs, not only not ideally, but not at all, one should not be discouraged. One should look at this as a wonderful opportunity. From now on, we'll be able to do mitzvahs in the best possible way. But like, what? Are most people not doing mitzvahs out there? Like what are they practicing? What religion are they practicing? We learned that if one doesn't have this formal kavana, then as one is not yotze the mitzvah. Are there any leniencies about this? Like, what do people rely on? So comes the Chai Adam, and he offers a life-saving leniency. He says that the requirement to repeat a mitzvah if it is not done with kavana is only if it might look like you're doing the mitzvah for some other reason. let's say you were learning how to blow shofar, or practicing, or let's say you happened to come across Kriya Shema while you were learning. But if you were saying Shema in the course of tefillah, or you just put on talis or you put on tefillin without a formal kavana, you'll be yotzei the mitzvah, because what else were you doing? It is only ma'akev to have kavana if we could say maybe you weren't doing a mitzvah, you were practicing the shofar, you were just learning. In other words, the opinion of the Chai Adam is that when it's muchach, if the context is clear that you're doing a mitzvah, kavana is not ma'akev. So this is a lifesaver. That means all those mitzvahs that I didn't have formal kavana for, I am still yotzei. So what's this whole drasha about? So first of all, not so fast. The Aruch HaShulchan does not agree to the leniency of the Chai Adam. Aruch HaShulchan writes in Siman Samach Sivches, Kivan de Kaimalan, Mitzvos Tzrichas Kavana, Yesh li zoher b'chol mitzvah lechavein l'shem mitzvah. You should be careful with every mitzvah to mechavein for the sake of a mitzvah. So the Aruch HaShulchan understands there are no exceptions. You must be mechavein by all mitzvahs. Furthermore, the Mishnah Berurah writes in Siman Samach Sivkat Yud Aleph, Sivkat Yud, that while one who fulfills the mitzvah, while one will b'di'evet fulfill the mitzvah according to the Chai Adam, it is certainly not ideal. You are not yotzei the mitzvah l'chatchila, you're only yotzei b'di'evet. Now most people want to do mitzvahs l'chatchila. People buy the most beautiful lulav and esrog not to do it b'di'evet, to do it l'chatchila. People buy the best pair of tefillin. What a shame it would be to end up performing these mitzvahs in an inferior, mediocre way after exerting all that effort and money. You know, the difference between having clear kavana before you do a mitzvah as opposed to relying on the concept of muchach could be compared to two gold cups that appear to be identical. One is valued at, let's say, $1 million, and one is valued at $100. And that's because the first cup is solid gold, and the other one is gold plated. To the untrained eye, they seem to be identical, but really, they are worlds apart. On the surface, the two mitzvahs may appear to be identical, but a mitzvah done with lechatchila, with a clear kavana, and a mitzvah done b'di'evet, there's a world of difference between them. Would a person be satisfied with just doing a mitzvah in a mediocre way? You know, a man once admitted to the Chafetz Chaim that he does the mitzvah of Shema, but he does it at the last possible zman. He does it b'di'evet, and yeah, some people do it l'chachila. He does it b'di'evet, and that's good enough. Chafetz Chaim says, yeah, there are people like that. There are tribes in Africa where the people are satisfied only in covering a small portion of their body, because b'di'evet, that's good enough. Pants, shirts, that's l'chatchila. They rely on b'di'evet. They live in thatched huts. They're satisfied eating fruit and raw meat. They don't need utensils. That's l'chatchila. They rely on b'di'evet. Chafetz Chaim looks at the guy straight in the eye. He says, how many rooms do you have in your house? And the guy turned white. He got the point. He realized that when it came to everything else in his life, he tried to do it in a much better way. So, to rely on the Chai Adam, it's not so simple. You'll only be yotzei the mitzvahs b'di'evet. Furthermore, there are a whole host of mitzvahs that the Chai Adam's svara does not apply to, where it's not obvious that you're fulfilling a mitzvah. And even the Chai Adam would agree that if you don't have kavana, you're not even mekayim the mitzvah b'di'evet. For example, lending money, paying back a loan, hashavas aveda, paying a worker on time. You know, sometimes people do mitzvahs and they're not necessarily motivated by the fact that it's a mitzvah. They're motivated by being a good guy, a good citizen, for humanitarian reasons. And if one does not think they're doing a commandment of Hashem, even Chayadim would agree, they're not Yotzei the mitzvah, even B'di'eved. What about Bikur Cholim? It's not Muchach you're doing it for a mitzvah. Being Mesameach Chasan V'Kala, escorting a mace, honoring a father and mother, taking care of your health, going to work. All of these activities need Kavana to be Yotzei the mitzvah, even in B'di'eved, and to this the Chayadim would agree. Now, truth be told, there are poskim that hold that when it comes to interpersonal mitzvahs, one does not need to have Kavana, and even the opinion Mitzvos Tzrichas Kavana would hold that for these mitzvahs, you do not need Kavana. Rabbi Yosef Engel explains that by mitzvahs bein adam l'chaveroi, the mitzvah is not the act. For example, giving tzedakah, the mitzvah is not the act of handing the dollar to the ani. The mitzvah is the result that in the end the ani has money and you benefited him. So since the mitzvah is the result, how you did it is inconsequential. You only need kavana when the mitzvah is the act, but when the mitzvah is the result, as long as it resulted, we don't care how the result came about. Or another way to say it, as the Rabbi Yehuda said it, tefillin, sukkah, lulav only has value because they're commandments of Hashem. So you need to think, I am doing the command of Hashem. As opposed to when you benefit other people, these activities have value because of what you help, because you're helping your friend. So therefore, even if you're not mechavein that it's a mitzvah of Hashem, they are of value. So interestingly, Rabbi Yashav Paskins, in Piskei Hagan Rabbi Yashav an Yardea, he says, even though bein adam l'chaveroi l'chadchila you should be mechavein, but it's not ma'akev to have kavana. However, the Chafetz Chaim in Avas Chesed Chelek Beis Perek Chaf Gimel in the Haggah, he disagrees. He says, Ein loymar de le'inyan tzedakah v'chesed, that the ani is makabel and therefore you don't need kavana. Also, the Chayadim writes, one needs to have kavana by mitzvahs bein adam l'chaveroi. Here's another area where kavana is needed. When refraining from a lav, many people are under the impression kavana is only needed when you fulfill a positive commandment, but it doesn't apply to avoid a negative command. I understand if I take a haircut, I shouldn't cut off my payas, or I shouldn't use a razor, but do I need to have specific kavana not to violate the lav of cutting off the payas or using a razor? And again, the Bnei Yissaschar writes in Derech Pikudecha, he says, that a lav cannot be fulfilled without kavana. Says Bnei Yissaschar, it's a pasuk. V'shamarta refers from desisting from negative prohibitions. You should fulfill with all your heart. What do you mean with all your heart? It means you need to have kavana to mekayim alav. As Arizal writes, when it comes to taking a haircut, one needs to have kavana that he's doing it and intentionally refraining from cutting off his payas. Here's another idea that I was totally shocked, and I must admit, I never really thought about it. You know, the sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos. One year, Shabbos Shuva, a number of years ago, I spoke about the danger of cell phones, and that's before I knew cell phones could blow up. And I was talking about how it saps us of our time and our ability to, we lose moments, and we lose the ability to perform the sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos. And I was feeling very proud. I try to the best of my ability to fulfill the sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos at least once a day. And now I'm thinking to myself, you know, maybe I didn't do it properly, and I'm not doing it properly because I don't have the formal kavana before I think about the sheish mitzvahs tamidiyos to mekayim these mitzvahs that are taloi b'machshava. Do mitzvahs that are dependent on thought need to have kavana to fulfill them? In other words, do I need to think before I have a thought of a mitzvah that I want to fulfill a mitzvah? Now, by the way, does one have to enunciate this kavana, or is it enough to think it? So halachically, it's enough to think it. Our Chashulchan Siman Samach Sivches says, "Hakavana b'leiv ein tzrichim la'amra b'peh. Indeed, in Derech Pikudecha, in the Hakdama, he writes that to fulfill thought-related mitzvahs, one has to have kavana beforehand. Also in the Sefer Mitzvos Halavavos, in the Hashmatos of Hilchos Kavanas HaMitzvos, written by Rabbi Meir Lichtenstein, he writes, mitzvahs that are done believe, you need to have kavana. I would just argue, perhaps you could say that maybe they don't have to have kavana. Why? What's the reason why kavana is so important? The Rabbi Yehuda said, the Rabbi Meir said, the mind is the main part of man, so if the mind is not participating in the mitzvah, you're not doing anything. But a mitzvah that is taloi b'kavana, a mitzvah that you're doing in your mind is already participating in the mitzvah. Maybe it's not needed. It's extraneous to have another formal kavana that I have in mind to be mekayim the mitzvah of thinking something. I'm already thinking something. You know, the story goes about the great tzaddik, Rabbi Lopian, the menahel of Yeshivas Kfar Chasidim, that he was once walking down the paths of Kfar Chasidim and he met two men. They're both carrying large vats of tar to a bonfire and they were paving the roads. And Rav Lopian asked these fellows, one was a Taimani, religious fellow, and one was a secular Jew. And he says first to the secular Jew, you know, what are you doing? He said, well, Rabbi, what do you think I'm doing? I'm paving the road to make money. Rav Lopian turned to the Taimani, he said, what are you doing, sir? And he says, Kvod Harav, I'm doing chesed. The street is a passageway for many people. Many old men walk down the street, it's very difficult for them. Women push carriages, they can't get the carriages through. And I'm providing them a service, I'm doing them a chesed. I'm doing a community, I'm benefiting the community. All day long I'm doing chesed. Rav Lopian was so moved to hear these words, he went to the yeshiva, he clapped on the bima, he says, I have a riddle for you. How's it possible for two people to do the exact same thing? One of them is earning olam haba, is involved in doing chesed the whole day, and the other one is merely doing a temporary act of making a living. And the mashgiach describes what he had just saw with the two men who were schlepping tar to the fire to pave the street, and one of them had the short kavana to do a mitzvah of chesed, and the other one was just doing it for his personal benefit. And the trajectory of these two people's lives could not be more different. Says Rav Zilberstein, this story should be a cornerstone of our observance. There's so many things we do in this world that with a small amount of kavana, we could completely transform and elevate them. Sometimes somebody gets up numerous times in the night to calm a crying baby. If you do it just out of your own interest, to quiet the baby, to get back to sleep, you haven't really done much. But what if your kavana is, you're trying to help the baby, you're doing a chesed to the baby, you're doing a chesed to your wife. Then you stayed up in the middle of the night to do a wondrous act of chesed. This needs to be like the cornerstone of our lives. You could have two people. You work in a grocery. They both work in a grocery. They sell cars. They sell radiators. They're pharmacists. They're doctors. They're lawyers. One of them could be doing a great chesed and mitzvah all day, and the other one could merely just be making money. What's the difference between these two individuals? You can have two people, they wake up in the morning and they go to the office for 10 hours. One of them is doing an act of tzedakah of a chesed the entire day, and one of them, their life is completely meaningless. And the difference between them is a short nanosecond of thought. If you go to work and you think, I'm going to work to help people, to provide a service to people, to make money, to be able to feed my family, so I'm doing chesed to my wife and to my children, I'm doing it to be able to send them to yeshiva, then everything you do is chesed, is tzedakah, is hachzakas haTorah. And if you just go to work to make money, you've basically wasted 10 hours of your time, you've wasted your whole life, and all you've done is you've brought home a few dollars. So you say, this is the most demoralizing shiur I've ever heard. I've been going to work, I've been doing mitzvahs for 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. What do I do now? I don't even know if I've done one mitzvah in my entire life. This could cause a person great anguish. So I want to share two very important thoughts, and they're really one. In the Sefer Shari Oira, of the lectures of Harav Avigdor Miller, Rav Miller discusses the Gemara in Ksubas on Kuf Gimel Amud Beis that records the account of the Patira of Rebbe. The Gemara relates that when Rebbe passed away, a Baskol proclaimed that anyone who is present at Rebbe's funeral is designated for Olam Haba. And there was a particular leader, there's a particular launderer, a koives, who would visit Rebbe daily. And he didn't show up that day. And he couldn't believe it. He was so distraught. He missed the opportunity to be at Rebbe's funeral and gain Olam Haba. So he climbed up the roof and he threw himself off. Whereupon another voice proclaimed, this launderer too is primed for the world to come. How did the launderer merit the world to come? He was not present at Rebbe's funeral. So Rav Miller explained that from here we see a great principle. That yearning for ruchnius, even after the opportunity has passed, and feeling bad sometimes that you missed out on the opportunity, is a very great thing. And when a person experiences anguish because of a missed opportunity, say a person thinks, oh, in my youth I could have learned more, I could have learned better, but the time has passed me by. This is a very great thing in its own right. This, the Sefer Kasher Tziva Hashem, applies to Kavana b'mitzvos. If a person feels anguish that he missed so many opportunities to have Kavana when he was younger, that painful regret is such a tremendous achievement that will bring him tremendous merit. That anguish will be mashlim, will compensate for all of the missed opportunities of Kavana that he's ever had. So one should not be afraid of feeling distress. One should feel that his distress will be a source of eternal reward. But let's add another nekuda. Halachically, one needs to have Kavana before the performance of a mitzvah. However, b'diavad, if one forgot and is still engaged in the mitzvah, b'diavad, you could still have the kavana. So for example, you're giving someone a ride, and you forgot to be mechavein at the beginning of the ride, to be mekayim the mitzvah of chesed, one will still be yotzei the mitzvah b'diavad. But what if one had kavana after the mitzvah? It doesn't count. If it's still Toich Kedei Dibor, Rav Shlomo Zalman is Mesupik. But still I want to share with you an important thought. Because Rav Miller had another amazing chiddush. Rav Miller used to give a secret vad in his basement for select people, and he would reveal certain secrets of Musar. And my father was one of the selected elite members of this group who were assigned certain avodos, and I want to share with you one secret that Rav Miller revealed at this special meeting. Rav Miller revealed that retroactive kavana has value. We learn this from the mitzvah of shikha. You're gathering wheat, and you drop a bundle, and an ani finds it, and the Torah says, well, if after the ani finds it, you say, all right, it's farfal, and let him keep it, it will be a merit for you. But you never had kavana at the time that it fell. You weren't even aware at the time it fell. Nevertheless, once you find out about it and you think, okay, I'm good with it, it's a chus for you. So Rav Miller says from here we see retroactive kavana has value. Rav Miller would apply this to bris milah. At the time you had a bris milah, as far as I know, I don't think you had kavana. Reports are that you were kicking and screaming when you had the bris milah. So you didn't want to do it, but nevertheless, now that it's done, Rav Miller would teach, when you say the words V'al-brischa shechasamta b'b'sarenu, think, now that I have a bris milah, I'm happy I have it, and that has great value. So too, even though many years have gone by, without having any formal kavana when you did a mitzvah, say to yourself, today, on the third day of Tishrei, Shabbos Shuva, Tavshin Pehei, now that I've done all these mitzvahs, I'm supplying retroactive kavana. Is that sufficient halachically? No. But does that have significance? Absolutely yes. So the first way to upgrade your mitzvahs, to give them a good polish, to shine them, have a formal kavana before you do a mitzvah. Now, number 2, second way to polish your mitzvahs. You know the Chida, you know how connected I am to the Chida. He lived an amazing, colorful life of Torah scholarship, dissemination, travel. How he was able to accomplish so much could best be described in his Sefer, Moira Be'etzba, Ois Kufno and Gimel. He says, Mi she'enoi ma'abed es hazman, someone who doesn't waste time, yesh zman lakal, there's time for everything. Well, says the Chida in his very first comment in the Sefer Moira Be'etzba, he says, Koidem kol limod v'chol mitzvah, before any learning or any mitzvah, toiv laharher tshuva. It's good to have a thought of tshuva. You want every mitzvah to be performed as an eligible, worthy individual. Boy, will your mitzvah shine if you take a millisecond to have a thought of tshuva before you perform a mitzvah. So that's the second way. Now, you ready for this? Another 3 ways to elevate and shine your mitzvah. You know, like a good shoe shine, you need to use a cream and a liquid and a wax. A cream, a liquid, and a wax. You use that, boy, will your shoes shine. They'll be spectacular. So we're going to add another 3 ingredients to your mitzvahs to really produce a magnificent mitzvah. Says the Sefer Charedim in his Hakdama, Ois Daled. Lasois ha-mitzvah b'yira u'ba'ahava, to do mitzvahs with fear and with love. Like the Rashbi said, Kol pekuda de lav I b'dechilu rachimu lav pekuda here. Any mitzvah that's not with fear and with love is not a mitzvah. By the way, the Sefer Charedim adds another ingredient besides fear, love. He says, Hasimcha hagadoila b'mitzvah, the great joy in doing a mitzvah. D'chol mitzvah u'mitzvah shetizdamin loi, any mitzvah that you have the opportunity to do, doiranuhu, is a gift to shadr le kutchabricha that God is sending you. Ulefi roiv hasimcha, according to the abundant simcha, yigdal scharai, you magnify your schar. Says Rabbeinu Bechaye, the simcha that you add to a mitzvah is a mitzvah by itself. And by the way, the Chassam Sofer writes, the reward you'll get for the simcha you put into a mitzvah is more than the mitzvah itself. So, those are another 3 ingredients, and here's one final kavana. After all, a great polish, after a good polish, all your shoe needs is a good buff, and boy will that shoe gleam. Now the truth is, even if you just have the first kavana, that you're doing the mitzvah, kasher tziva Hashem, you're already head and shoulders above your friends. But if you try to adopt some of these kavanas, most of these kavanas, or even all of these kavanas, you will be propelled to the very heavens. It's really 2 separate kavanas. Says Mesilas Yesharim in Chelkei HaChasidus, HaKavana b'chol mitzvah v'avoida shetia le'iloi kevoidoi shel makoim b'ma shebriyosav oisim nachas ruach lefanav. Why don't you have the following kavana? I'm doing this mitzvah, I'm putting on tefillin, I'm wearing tzitzis, I'm saying Birchas HaTorah to bring nachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to make your Father in heaven happy. And another kavana? Mesilas Yesharim writes, Roi l'chol chassid sheyiskavein b'masav. It is worthwhile, it is worthy for every righteous person to have kavana in his acts, l'toivas doirai, for the benefit of his generation, l'zakoi soisam, to bring them merit, u'lahagin aleim, and to protect them. Like the pasuk says, Imru tzadik ki toiv ki pri ma'alehem yoichelo, kol hadar oicham miparaisav. So these are 7 kavanas. Even if you do 1 mitzvah a day with these 7 kavanas, whether it's Shema, Tefillin, Chesed, davening, and you think, I'm doing this mitzvah, number 1, kasher tziva Hashem, like Hashem commanded. Number 2, I'm having thoughts of Shuva. Number 3, I'm doing it with love of Hashem. Number 4, fear of Hashem. Number 5, simcha. Number 6, lasois nachas ruach milafanav. Number 7, l'toivas klal Yisrael, ulazakoisam. Imagine if you did mitzvahs this way. You say, how am I supposed to remember all of this? That's where this handout comes in. Upgrade your mitzvahs. Number 1, Kavana, kasher tziva Hashem. 2, tshuva. 3, ahava. 4, yira. 5, simcha. 6, lasos, nachas ruach milfanav. 7, l'toivas hadar. And we put here a humble tefillah that you could think or say before you do a mitzvah. Hareini muchan umazuman l'kayim mitzvahs so-and-so, kasher tzivani b'tayrasecha, v'hineni shav lefanecha al kol chatoi, v'ratzisi l'kayim oisa be'ahava, be'yira, u'besimcha, la'sois nachas ruach milfanecha, v'shayia l'toivas klal Yisrael, l'zakoisam, u'lahagen aleim. If you do one mitzvah with these kavanos, you will change the whole world. Ashrei ha'am yohdei serua. Fortunate is the nation that knows the trua, who understands the message of the shofar that cries out to Klal Yisrael. Shapru maseichem. Beautify your actions. Boy, will you create a mitzvah that will illuminate b'chal ha'olamos. It will illuminate the whole world. It will bring zuchus to Klal Yisrael. It will offer protection to Klal Yisrael. And will bring the geula ever closer. Amen. Kein yehi ratzain. A gemar chasima taiva.